Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this installment of the Dean's Conversation Series. I'm very excited to welcome two special guests, Lauren Kaeseberg and Angel Gonzalez. Lauren is with the Innocence Project of Illinois, and I'll give you a little bit more about her background in a moment. But one of the many great things about the merger with UIC is that we became part of the University of Illinois system. And that system has three universities, UIC, Urbana-Champaign, and Springfield. And it turns out the Innocence Project of Illinois is based at the University of Illinois at Springfield. And so we have already developed one connection with the Innocence Project of Illinois. We have started an externship program. So if the Innocence Project is something that you're interested in exploring, please see Professor Megan Bess and talk to her about the externship program. And then we're continuing to talk to Lauren about other ways that we can connect, whether it's volunteering or maybe even eventually having an innocence clinic, which would be something that I would love to have the connection, that they would actually have a formal affiliation with us, not that we would compete with them. So without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about Lauren. She is the legal director of the Chicago office of the Illinois Innocence Project. So even though it's based at UIS, they have an office here as well. So if you're thinking about externing, it can be here in Chicago as well as in Springfield. She represents clients in DNA and non-DNA actual innocence cases. She received her bachelor's from DePaul. She then taught high school, and then after teaching high school for a while, she went to Cardozo Law School in New York City, where she was in the inaugural class of the Public Service Scholars. In law school, she participated in the Innocence Project Clinic program for more than 2 years as a clinic student, an intern, and a teaching assistant. After graduating from law school, she moved back to Chicago and began working as a private criminal defense attorney in Lake County. She then joined the defense team of former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, and she represented him at both the federal trials and on appeal. She has extensive experience in trial law, post-conviction, and appellate cases. Angel is one of the Innocence Project of Illinois' exonerees, and Lauren is going to talk to us first about a little bit more about the Innocence Project and work with Angel to tell his story. We're in webinar format tonight. We want you to participate. So if you have a question for either Lauren or Angel, put it in the Q&A and I'll be monitoring that and we'll ask those questions as we go through the program. So Lauren and Angel, welcome tonight. Lauren, I'll turn the program over to you right now.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I know that Angel and I are both so happy to be here, and most of the people who are attending this probably want to hear from Angel and not me as much. So I'll try to be somewhat brief and then we'll get to hear a little bit from Angel as well. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the Illinois Innocence Project and how we're structured and what we do. So as Dean Dickerson said, we're located primarily at the University of Illinois Springfield, but we have a Chicago office, which is where I am located, along with another staff attorney who's up in the Chicago area. We've always been sort of a unique innocence organization because being based at an undergraduate university, we work directly with undergraduate students in addition to law students. Most innocence organizations around the country that work with students only work with law students. And so we have a pretty interesting formula where undergraduate students work with us on like intake issues. So they'll do evaluation of cases, they do FOIA requests, they help us sort of work up the cases that come into our office, people asking for help. Once a case gets to a point where we're actually able to work substantively on the case and it sort of gets through that intake process and it's accepted as an active case, then it becomes a case that a lawyer is working on at the project, and we like to bring law students in to that part of the process. And we're so excited to be partnering with UIC and John Marshall. It's been a great experience so far. We've got a couple students who've been working with us this past semester. And I think it's a real natural fit. And it's, you know, for me, I feel like whenever I do a program with a law school or even just working with law students, it's a very full circle moment for me because, you know, I went to law school to do innocence work and I was inspired by hearing about a couple cases of people who had been innocent on death row in Illinois. And so then, you know, sort of coming full circle and now having 15 years behind me basically of doing this work in some capacity, it's great to be able to talk to all of you and sort of share some of those experiences. At the Illinois Innocence Project, we have 3 parts of our mission. So we represent individuals who are in prison who are innocent. We also have an educational mission, which obviously I sort of talked about that a little bit. And then we also have a reform and a policy mission. So I think one of the really amazing things about this area of law and the work that we do is that it's obviously amazing to work with an individual client like Angel and get their case to completion and walk somebody out of prison is, like I tell my husband, it was like feels better than like the birth of your child. Like it's amazing to get some, you know, prove someone's innocence and be able to exonerate them. But what really is so impactful too is that I think the innocence movement for the last 20 plus years has really focused on taking the lessons learned from each individual case and applying them to the greater system, the criminal justice system. So we can learn from these cases and we can use them as a way to move progress forward and try to help the system be better. I think we hear Angel's dogs in the background. Oh, yeah. He's a dog lover, yes. I guess now, you know, we can talk a little about Angel's case. I'll give a little bit of background on his case. So I always think, you know, Angel's case is such an example of sort of the different intersection of different areas of law, as well as sort of like this compounding injustice upon injustice upon injustice. And so basically his story in terms of this case begins in 1994. Angel was young, he was a teenager. He had been one night in July of 1994, had spent the evening with his girlfriend at his girlfriend's sister's apartment in Waukegan. They were watching movies and eating pizza and just hanging out normal. Completely unbeknownst to him, in the neighboring building in that same apartment complex, a woman had been kidnapped and attacked that night. So this woman who becomes the victim in this case, she had been at home in her apartment. Someone had been buzzing the buzzer for her apartment. She kept trying to let them in. No one was ever coming in. So she went to sort of see what was going on and opened out the outer door to the apartment building. And when she did that, she was grabbed by 2 men. They dragged her forcibly. One man held on to her waistband of her shorts and dragged her. Another man put his arm around her and dragged her. They dragged her to the back seat of a car, threw her in the back seat of the car. One of the men laid on top of her in the back seat of the car, and they drove to another location. And in a park area, she was sexually assaulted multiple times and beaten really badly. And it was terrible, terrible crime. This woman was absolutely traumatized by what happened to her. After these attackers were finished assaulting her, they left and they left her where she was. She made her way to a local store where they were able finally to call the police, and the police came. The police talked to her initially, and she gave a description of who these 2 attackers were, and her description was somewhat vague, but it had some important details in it. So she told the police that her attackers were both Hispanic. She didn't describe any facial hair. She didn't describe, you know, anything of note on anyone's face. She was about 5'7" or 5'8", and she said that both of the attackers were taller than she was. And she gave a description of the car. So she said it was like a late 80s model sedan with tinted windows. So several, you know, hours go by. The police are in the apartment talking to her. They're talking to the victim's boyfriend. And the victim's boyfriend looks out the window and sees a car pulling out of the parking lot. And he goes, "I've never seen that car before. That car doesn't belong here. That sounds like what she's talking about. Go follow that car." So based on this hunch, the police get the license plate number of that car and they start to track that car down. That happens to be Angel's car, and Angel is driving that car. The car is somewhat similar to what she described. And again, she sort of gave this vague description of the car. So Angel had his girlfriend in the car with him. He drops her off at her home and then is on his way just to go home and go to bed for the night, stops at a gas station. And while he's there getting gas, a police car pulls up, guns drawn, spotlight on, and that's the last day he spent in freedom, or the last moments for the next 21 years. So as these police officers approach the car, Angel, again, was a teenager. He had just come recently to the US from Mexico, didn't speak a lot of conversational English, and didn't really understand what was going on. And these police officers are, shouting at him in English. And really what Angel understood to be happening was that some crime had happened that night. A woman had been hurt and that his car was somehow involved, and didn't understand what was going on. The police immediately take him to the Waukegan police station, put him in a paper jumpsuit, and just leave him all night and leave all the lights on. They won't let him sleep the whole night. The following morning, after he'd been already awake for 26 hours with no sleep, they start interrogating him in English. And it's this very frustrating back and forth, interrogation. And Angel is consistently saying, I'm innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. I had nothing to do with this. They finally bring in a Spanish-speaking detective. And this is sort of like a side issue with some cases we see where you get a Spanish-speaking detective in a situation like this, where that detective, it's sort of like the only link the person has to be able to communicate. So there's like an initial trust there, and then that trust really gets abused. And so what ultimately happens is, after hours and hours of interrogation, they ask Angel to write out a statement. He writes out a statement in Spanish, and when the police read it, it doesn't match the details of the crime at all, because he doesn't know the details of the crime because he didn't commit the crime. But instead of that, and instead of at this point realizing that he doesn't match the description that this victim had given, that he had a goatee at the time, he has a birthmark on his face that the victim didn't describe, he's shorter than the victim, and also the fact that his car actually in the back seat had been loaded up with speaker equipment in the back seat, where it would have been physically impossible for this woman, let alone the woman and an attacker, to lay across the back seat. So there's all these red flags, but the police have him there, and they feel like they just want to close this case. And so they end up writing out, and they tell him that they're translating his confession into English. They write out a written statement in English, have him sign it, but it's a totally different statement than what he wrote. So the statement that he ultimately signs is a confession to this crime, and he unwittingly and unknowingly confessed, and falsely confessed. Ends up, going to trial, obviously, and, during the trial, had an interpreter at the trial. There are issues there that we could have a whole, session on, talking about issues there, and the inability for Angel's family to understand every stage of the proceedings, and for him to assist in his own defense. And then he ends up being convicted of sexual assault and kidnapping, and was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Once in prison, and I think Angel can speak to this later, it was not, it's not easy by any sense of anyone's definition, but especially starting out a prison sentence when you're a teenager, you don't speak English. There were problems, and it was hard. And so Angel ended up in solitary confinement, mainly because of language barriers and issues, and not, being perceived as not following orders and following instructions. So while in solitary confinement, there was a protest of some sort for conditions of guards not giving the inmates that were in segregation the, reading materials, writing materials. And so the inmates who were all in segregation staged a protest where they flooded their sinks, and they ended up charging each of these individuals with destruction of state property for this flood. So while Angel is first starting out his prison sentence, he gets nailed with another case on destruction of state property, and ends up being convicted of that and sentenced to a 3-year consecutive prison sentence that's supposed to be tacked on to the end of the one that he was serving. And that was out of Livingston County, where Pontiac Prison is located. Additionally, and this is where I'm talking about you know, the intersection of law, different areas of law, and also just like how these injustices just continue to build on each other. Angel, while, you know, before he went to prison, before he was wrongly sent to prison, his family had all applied for visas for immigration status. And while Angel was in prison, his visa number came available. So he would have otherwise been able to obtain this visa and then be on the pathway to citizenship, which is what his family did. So the entire time Angel was in prison, the rest of his family who was here all were able to go down, you know, take all the right steps, and they all became naturalized US citizens. Angel was never able to avail himself of his visa and do that because he was incarcerated. So by the time we get to the end of this story and the end of this case, it all sort of comes to a head. So as Angel, you know, from day one had maintained his innocence, fought to try to prove his innocence, and actually before, you know, a decade before we ever got in, or over a decade before we ever were involved in his case, his family hired a private attorney, and they made a motion for DNA testing in Lake County to try to get some DNA and prove his innocence. And that motion was granted. And so in 2001, Angel actually had some DNA testing done in his case. And they obtained a profile from rape kit evidence from semen from one of the attackers. And because his crime involved two perpetrators, the state argued successfully, and the judge agreed that because there was only one person's DNA identified in 2001, it wasn't sufficient to prove his innocence because he could be the other guy. And so that DNA testing, you know, here you have this big high and like, oh my gosh, we got a DNA profile, and then this huge down of like, oh my God, it didn't matter and I'm still in prison. So an entire another decade goes by, and then Angel was able to have his case taken up first by the Innocence Project based out of New York, the Innocence Project where the Innocence movement really started. And then we came on at the Illinois Innocence Project as local and co-counsel with them. So finally, by 2013, 2014, he was back in court with agreement with the state to get additional DNA testing done. And in 2015, in January, we were able to successfully obtain DNA evidence that conclusively and without doubt proved that he was innocent. So based on some additional rape kit swabs and also touch DNA or handler DNA, which at that time in 2015 was like cutting edge technologies, the lab was able to get DNA off of the victim's waistband where this attacker had grabbed her, as well as a personal hygiene item that she'd been wearing that the attacker had touched as well. And you had repetitive, redundant profiles on multiple pieces of evidence, and they were clearly two individual men, neither of which were Angel, and it proved that he was innocent. So finally, after 21 years, we had DNA that proved that he was innocent. We go to court, it's, you know, Waukegan, we're in Lake County, we're so excited. He's brought into the courtroom and the state agreed to vacate his convictions. And we went to hug him, and the judge admonished us to not hug him because he was going to be taken back into custody and sent back into the custody of the Department of Corrections because he now had a 3-year sentence to serve on destruction of state property. This is like, again, like this, you know, salt in the wounds, this injustice that just like seemed to never end. Luckily, we were able to go the very next day, and there was a slew of constitutional deprivations and violations in the case out of Livingston County, including that all of these guys who had all been charged with this destruction of state property were represented in court by one attorney without any conflict waivers, like no issues. There was that, there was interpreter issues, there was a ton of actually very legitimate issues. And so we were able to have that conviction vacated. As I always sort of say, Angel spent, you know, 21 years plus in prison for something he didn't do, plus a day, right? This one additional night that was just so torturous. And then he's finally going to be getting out of Dixon Correctional Center. And then we had to worry about ICE coming to maybe pick him up because of his immigration status, because since he had been wrongfully in prison, he could never avail himself of the visa. He didn't have documented status in the United States. And so we had to then deal with those travails and go down that road and bring in immigration attorneys. And luckily, we were able to have Angel walk out to us and not be taken into custody. This is also in 2015, which was a different administration, I think, with different, not getting political, but just different way of handling some of those issues. And so, you know, that night, finally walking out of Dixon, Angel was able to go home to his family in Waukegan, which was amazing, and then started the process of getting his immigration status cleared up, and happy to say that it's completely resolved today. There's no more issues dangling out there. And Angel ultimately was also granted a certificate of innocence, which is a separate civil proceeding, which I'm happy to talk more about later. If there's questions about that, that takes place after someone's had their convictions vacated. He received a certificate of innocence, which was, you know, the declaration of the court and the state that he was innocent. So that's sort of the background on his case. I don't know, Dean Dickerson, if there's any questions at this point, or if you want me to. Yeah.
I have questions, and I'll remind the audience to please use the Q&A box to write your questions for Angel or for Lauren, so that we can present those. First, Angel, I just want to say how sorry I am that you were caught up in this injustice that lasted 21 plus years. You know, we hope that our justice system works, and justice was very slow for you, and did the system did not work for you in so many ways. So as someone who's part of that system, I apologize for that. I would just like to know what you're doing now and what your life is like now is my first question, because you were talking about your dogs earlier, and obviously you agreed to come talk to a group of law students. What's life like for you right now?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me today, and thank you, Lauren, for inviting me. Probably I'm still trying to catch up running with life. Some days running, some days okay, some days trying to not to think about what had happened. And I know the system is not perfect, but I still believe in the system. I still believe the system, of course, with help like the Innocence Project and other organizations. When there is help, most of the times if there is evidence, the system accepts in very different ways. Okay, there's a mistake here, and then we're going to give them the opportunity to go back to court, and that's what happened in my case with, of course, the help of the Innocence Project and Lauren and so many other good people and other organizations. But it's everyday thing that you have to kind of just sit and say, well, thank you that I'm free, and thank you to all the people that were there to help me. And that's why I'm doing this when Lauren invited me, or the Innocence Project or any other organization. Yeah, just like talking about a nightmare that happened. It's not pleasant to talk about it. It's not, in a way, good to remember, but I do it for the main purpose of hopefully by me speaking up about what had happened to me, others get the help they are looking for, or to stop from another injustices to happen in the beginning. So because how many times we hear the news, well, somebody got shot, somebody got kidnapped, and we have somebody, and we trust the news media, we trust the system, and sometimes the system is not very fair, like in my case, for example. And I'm not saying the system is bad, it's just that sometimes all it takes one person, one detective, one police officer not to do their job, and they will lead to a lot of problems.
Thank you. Well, the questions are flowing right in. Another question is, did they ever catch the perpetrators, and have you ever interacted with the victim?
As far as I know, they haven't apprehended nobody. I don't think they have. I don't know if they're investigating or what they're really doing about it. As far as I know, they are not doing anything about it. And I know I have not have contact or talking or any source of communication with the victim. I feel sorry for her. As far as I understand, she has some kind of mental issues, and that's probably the main problem as far as I the last time I heard, she still believes that there was one of the men that assaulted her.
Did Angel, I don't know how it works in Illinois. I know in Texas, where I was affiliated with another Innocence Project clinic, there's a way to go to the legislature and get compensation if you had been wrongfully convicted. Is that something that you've been able to pursue here in Illinois?
Yes, with the help of Lauren and many of the attorneys and so on. When I got out in 2015, there was an issue going on here with the state with due to the budget. It took a few years for me in order to kind of give some compensation. It was granted, it was accepted, but they were having some problems with the budget. But thankfully, here in Illinois, there's for most of us, I believe, compensation.
There is a compensation statute, and essentially you have to go through this process of receiving a certificate of innocence. As I said, so like once someone's conviction is vacated, then you can go, and it's a civil proceeding. Every county handles them somewhat differently, and once you're granted a certificate of innocence, you then are eligible for state compensation. But Illinois' state compensation is paltry compared to what it should be. It's better than a lot of states, but it's not quite as good as some states. The maximum that a person can receive is, I think, just under $230,000 as a maximum cap, depending. You could be in there for 50 years and that's what you would get. And then it's lower based on sort of what bracket of how many years you spent in prison.
Lauren, is that something that you have on the Innocence Project policy agenda to lift the cap?
So we've talked about trying to get better compensation. The other thing too is part of that statute also includes education, work training, like different elements that also help someone move their life forward. Those things have never really been funded or able to be funded. And so it's sort of like an emptiness there that needs to be fulfilled. You know, when someone is innocent and released from prison, and Angel can definitely speak to this, from his own experience and seeing other people go through it, there's no safety net at all. I mean, even if you get compensation, that's a whole nother litigated process. You know, in Angel's case, the state agreed to it, but it was still months later. And in many cases, the state will object and you have to litigate it in front of a judge. Maybe it goes up on appeal. I mean, it can be years before you even get a state compensation. And there is nothing that you get. You walk out of prison with whatever you have, whatever boxes you have. And if you don't have family to go stay with, then you're on your own. And it's a real problem.
How did the, Lauren, you talked about that sort of the second group of attorneys involved with Angel's post-conviction case was the Innocence Project of Illinois. And some people might remember that that's Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld's group. But how did Angel become connected with the Innocence Project?
So Angel became a client of the Innocence Project the same way a lot of people become our clients or clients of different innocence organizations, and that's through writing a letter and saying, I'm innocent, and asking for help. The one interesting aspect of Angel's case, sort of on top of that, is that it was actually his cellmate who was looking out for him. And, you know, at the time, Angel's English still was improving. And this guy was like, I'm going to help you. Let me write this letter for you and get this process started. So normally that's the way cases come to us, is someone who's in prison will write a letter to, many times innocent people in prison are writing letters to everybody they can possibly think of and to every organization, just desperately trying to get help. You know, we get, I think we get like 400 letters a year at the Illinois Innocence Project. We've got a queue of hundreds and hundreds of cases to be evaluated. We've got probably over 100 cases that have been evaluated, but we don't have the resources to take on. This is a massive, widespread problem of innocent people in prison. And most of it is really, I mean, you know, still the prison communication system is abysmal. And so most of it is really done by snail mail. And that's how a lot of our cases are started. And that's how Angel's was started.
So we have a series of questions for Angel, but one that would set some foundation. I'm assuming, Angel, you were never in juvenile prison, even though you were a teenager?
No.
Okay. So the first question is basically, how did you feel when you were convicted, and did you hold out hope that you would be released and exonerated? Just what was that process like of holding out hope? We've gotten these questions from several people. One person said, I can't imagine the level of strength it took to know you were innocent, and be sitting there for so long.
Well, at the beginning, I used to think to myself, can't be happening. This has to be a nightmare. One day, I'm just gonna wake up and say, well, it was a nightmare, but unfortunately, it wasn't. And but I just keep on fighting and say, well, somebody is gonna help me. Somebody's gonna listen. Your mind go on and on and on. And if you let it stay negative, it's gonna be negative. But if you just put in yourself in your head, somebody's gonna listen. Somebody's gonna say, wait a minute, this don't make no sense. And at the time, the DNA and so on, I used to hear on TV and on the media, on the news, and I remember one day thinking, I wish Barry was my attorney. And well, one day he became my attorney, but it took some strength, and I always used to think of my mom and say to myself, I'm going to prove to my mom and show to everybody that I'm not the kind of person. I did not commit the crime. My girlfriend was with me. Her sister was with me. Her friends were there. So, and then you just can't get by. Like, with so many things, somebody's going to listen. And it took some years. And finally, with this guy, my friend, OT, told me and informed me about this Innocence Project of New York. At the time, I didn't know. But he let me know. He said, will this organization help those that hate crimes? They involve DNA. The DNA is growing, and they're finding a lot of stuff to the DNA. But if you are guilty, don't waste their time, because they're going to find out that you are guilty. So I said, no, I'm not guilty. Can you please write the letter? And he did. I wrote the letter back in 1997, if I can remember correctly. But it takes a lot of strength. One day I was in a segregation by myself, and just something went on. The light just come on my head, say, well, what you doing? Here you are, getting more problems, getting into more and more and more. And that happened because I used to get mail from the court and legal documents, and I had no clue what was going on. And one day something, and when you're in segregation, you don't have anything, not much. And I look at the Bible, and I look at a pen and a paper, and I just decided to start writing down the Bible, the news papers, religious papers, magazines they offer you there, and copy. And I don't really know what I was copying, and I don't somehow think one thing led to another, and somebody told me, what you doing? And I said, well, I'm copying because I want to learn. And so I have a dictionary in English and Spanish that my family gave me, but I'm not using it much because I'm not going to learn Spanish. So it was given to me, and since that day, and to this day, I still kind of struggling with the language and learning. But there was something that pushed me and say, well, I gotta get out of here one day. And I remember when all the appeals were denied, and they were telling me no for whatever reason. I always think, well, the Innocence Project, one day they're gonna come back and say, well, do you need help? And in 2001, around that time, I was shut down, and I was like, well, this is it. That was it. And 2 years later, when the Innocence Project finally reached out to me again and said, well, this time for you, then we about to review your case and so many questions. So sure, as soon as the better. And it just went all the procedure and reading the papers, and they told you we review your case, we believe in you, just like light again in your life. It's just, okay, I have another chance of showing everybody, and mainly in my case to my mom, that I am innocent. I did not commit this crime. Because when you're in prison a little bit at a time, people start kind of forgetting about you. And it's hard some days to keep on moving and fighting, because some days you just don't have it no more. But I got involved in the school and in college classes, everything that I could, I was getting involved in. And that's how I managed to stay kind of on the line to keep on fighting for my freedom. And thank to the Innocence Project here in Illinois and New York, and there's so many other people that were involved to help me out.
Yeah. Lauren, maybe to fill in a couple of gaps in the story for us, it sounds like Angel never had an attorney during that time he was being questioned and signed the confession. Is that right?
That's right. And I believe, and I'd have to look back and be exactly precise, but my recollection as I sit here is that he was given a Miranda warning form, your rights, you have the right to remain silent, what you say can be used against you, you have the right to an attorney, but it was in English. And even to this day, there's inconsistencies in different jurisdictions about translating that form and letting people know their rights. And I think, with someone like Angel in like the circumstances Angel was in, having come from another country recently, it's sort of confusing. Like, what are my rights? Am I going to get a lawyer? What does this mean? A lot of times what we see in these interrogations is that the police are telling the person, if you get a lawyer, you're going to look guilty. So if you talk to me right now, we can clear this up. So let's work together. But if you get a lawyer, man, like, you're going to jail, like, they're going to think you're guilty. I'm here to help you and make this right for you. And I think there's always, such a feeling from individuals of like, I would never confess to something I didn't do. And, Angel's case is an outlier because of the language issues and signing the confession in English. But, it's like, I think the statistic is about 25% of DNA exoneration cases have a false confession in them. And even though it's counterintuitive and you think an innocent person would never confess to something that they didn't do, it actually, once your will is overborne and you just need to get out of that room, innocent people believe that, like Angel said, once I can talk to my family, once I can talk to a lawyer, like, this is going to get cleared up. There's evidence is not going to convict me. Like, I'm going to clear this up. So fine, I'll say what you want me to say. I'll sign the form. Give me what you want, and I'll clear it up later. But once you sign that, you've sealed your fate.
It sounds like there were multiple alibi witnesses. Were those people ever interviewed?
So the police did to Angel what they do to a lot of people, which is that they lied to him during his interrogation. So they lied to Angel and told him that they went and talked to his girlfriend and his girlfriend's sister, and that they said he wasn't with them, which was a complete lie. And in fact, the police never interviewed them at all. And that's despite the fact that they literally lived in the apartment building next door to where this crime had happened, where the police were visiting on a regular basis. So they didn't even try to check out his alibi.
And at trial, was Angel represented by private counsel or the public defender? And Angel, do you feel like your trial attorney represented you adequately?
He was a private attorney. I don't believe he did what attorney should have done. But at the time, like we talking about, I didn't know much about the law. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to ask. I just didn't know.
Yeah. We have a question of what happened to the detective who translated the false confession?
They are dead.
But were they punished for this? It sounds like
now,
no.
most of our cases, the detectives involved get promotions. We go through the file and there's like letters of commendation. You helped solve this terrible crime. You get a promotion. In fact, in Waukegan, in Lake County, there's another case. So Lake County, for anyone who's really interested in this area of law of wrongful convictions, should just Google Waukegan, Lake County wrongful convictions, and you'll have a lot to read because there's a plethora of examples. Another case up there is the case of Benny Starks, which is a case that I worked on as a law student when I was at the clinic program at the Innocence Project, and then stayed on his case for many years until he was finally exonerated. But by the time we were going back to court for him, there was actually the street that the courthouse is on is named after the detective in his case, So when you have people who are by this time in their career, like homicide detectives or major crimes detectives, they get more accolades, and these things don't really ever impact them. And same with prosecutors. There's really zero accountability for people.
We have several people who've asked, how do you decide what cases to take?
You know, we have every project has a very thorough process. Very briefly, ours is once we get a request for help from someone, we send them a questionnaire. The questionnaire is very lengthy. It's like too lengthy. I think it's like 20 pages or something that this person has to fill out. And then once we get that back, the undergraduate students in our program will do FOIA requests. We'll try to get all the case-related materials. And it takes a long time, and they do a really thorough evaluation of the case. And then we have regular meetings, and the cases are brought to our attention. And we then sort of, have to figure out what cases we have resources to take and how to do it. Our project being somewhat small, I think we're like, if you ranked all the different sizes of all the different innocence organizations around the country or the world, now it's an international movement, we're sort of probably like right there in the middle of size. But I kind of feel like we're like small and mighty because we don't have all the resources in the world. So that means we can really only take on the cases that we really can fight for. So when we're representing someone, we are all in, like we know and believe that this person is innocent.
That leads to another question we got is, how's the Innocence Project of Illinois funded?
We're funded through different sources, and it changes year by year. We have a huge annual event that's in person that we couldn't have this year, so you kind of got to wing it. It's like different nonprofit organizations. It's a mixture of, we have some state funding. We're obviously supported by the University of Illinois Springfield, and mostly private donations. And then we also have federal grants. So there's a federal DNA testing grant that's called the Bloodsworth Grant because it's named after Kirk Bloodsworth, who was the first person exonerated by DNA evidence off of death row in the entire country. And it's pretty amazing that now this program is named after him. So we get grants that help us pay for DNA testing. It's so expensive. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I would venture to guess that in Angel's case, the DNA testing probably cost, $30,000, $40,000 just the testing alone.
Angel, a question for you. One of our students has asked, what were you feeling the day you left prison knowing you would not be going back?
Well, there's a lot of emotions at the very moment because we mainly just so happy to walk out of prison and just to have proven and shown that you are innocent. Just so much to kind of describe. I was feeling happy, I was feeling sad. You just have all these feelings at once. Okay, now what? Because you walking out of prison and you don't really know where you're going. I'm going back to my family, and you just very happy and have so much joy for all the people that have helped you to finally walking out of prison free. And yes, mainly after all, I would say I was very, very, and I am very happy. And like I mentioned before, I'm trying to stay and look at every problem that I come across as positive. Where is the solution? Or this is happening, it's no big deal. When I have a hard day, it's like, okay, well, I'm free. It's not the end of the world.
Another one of our students asked, what other prisoners' rights did you want to see enforced other than access to reading materials? So what other human rights violations and other deprivations did you suffer and see in prison?
I can go on and on talking about it. As you may already know, there's a lot of problems going on inside prison system, and but mainly I believe that what is really impacting the last years I was there is the medical. It's just very poor assistance for those who need the attention, medical, and even just to see a doctor when you're not feeling well. It takes sometimes up to 2 weeks just to get to the nurse, and the nurse approves if you will see the doctor or not, and have a copay on top of it, and just that make it very difficult because, of course, sometimes the inmates abuse a little bit, and so they take it up with everybody. So like, okay, well, we're gonna make it so hard for you guys to see a doctor. And unfortunately, as far as I know, it's still going on.
Lauren, a few different legal issues for you. From one of our professors. Since Angel was originally convicted of a felony, does he have to check the box when he asks on applications whether he has ever been convicted of a felony, or does the certificate of innocence waive any affirmative answer of checking the box?
Yes, the certificate of innocence then results in a full expungement, so he does not have to check that box.
So the next one is, can someone who is undocumented and later proven innocent use the time for their immigration status application?
So I cannot even begin to be an expert in immigration law. It's so confusing to me, but it's because that's not what I do, right? I mean, it's like, you know what you do primarily. What I think was unique about Angel's case was that, as I understand it, because he had already had the application in place, and it was like a 1993 or 1994 original application, that there was a number granted to it. When he ultimately, just a few years ago, filed for that visa petition, he was able to use his original case number. So it put him sort of like in the queue for when the visas became available. There are many people who've been exonerated, proven innocent, who have not successfully been able to fight an immigration case. So there have been people who've been deported. There are people who volunteered to, voluntarily removed. It's not an automatic thing. I mean, really, the two systems of government, like the federal government doesn't necessarily care what the state has done. And in many cases, the state, it doesn't, like, you would think it would mean something. Like, I remember when we were dealing with Angel's, issues, knowing he was about to get out of prison, and we're like, he's been in prison for 21 years for something he didn't do, and that's the state's fault. But like, ICE might pick him up, and it was like, yeah, there's sort of two different arms that know what they're doing, and it's very frustrating.
Someone has asked if there's sort of a average length of time that people have been in prison before exonerating. They were like, is 21 years a normal amount of time?
I know this statistic.
Okay.
So in DNA exonerations, the average sentence is 14 years. And I don't know the exact number for our project, but it's way higher for our cases. So at the Illinois Innocence Project, I would guess that our average is probably about 20 plus years.
We have a series of questions, two about policy, then two about how students can get involved. So the two policy questions: is the Innocence Project doing any policy work to eliminate long solitary confinements in private prisons? And then the other one is, are there any policy efforts to prevent law enforcement agents from basically being manipulative or using interrogation techniques that have been proven faulty?
So those are both, I think, issues that are like on the cusp of becoming, issues that I think are going to be advocated for through the different innocence organizations. For those who are interested in the policy side of this, if you go to the Innocence Project in New York's webpage, I think it's innocenceproject.org, there is a whole policy page there, and they have an amazing policy department. And they actually have people who work there out of the New York office who then sort of go out and assist in the different states to help pass legislation in different states. I know a huge issue is manipulation during these interrogations. That's one issue that there's going to be a lot of pushback from law enforcement because they see it as a very valuable tool for them to be able to do an interrogation. So it'll be interesting to see where that leads. But certainly the cases of innocent people are things that, most people can't and shouldn't ignore. And so being able to highlight how this impacted an innocent person really does help have it be something that then can change the system to help everybody who's a suspect.
So I'm going to read you the two other questions. I want to put them together. One is one from one of our professors. It says, Lauren, thank you for sharing your experience in lawyering. I think that it would be helpful for students to hear what kinds of human rights or civil rights advocacy they can do to support the work of the Illinois Innocence Project. The other one, I can't tell who it's from, an anonymous attendee says, how can students get involved? are there any classes that address these types of issues?
So for the first question, if you are interested in just like helping the community of innocent people in prison or people in prison in general, I think there are a lot of organizations that do that. Sort of de facto, we end up doing that when we're representing our clients, especially now during COVID. The world kind of shut down in March, and we were set on fire. We were filing so many requests for release for our clients, but also sending letters to different wardens at different prisons and trying to advocate for medical attention, like Angel said, and different things. So we, I don't have a list as I sit here, but I'm certainly, and I could say this at the end too, but I'm more than happy to, if anybody has questions and wants to reach out one-on-one. It was my experiences in law school and the, working with people like Barry Scheck and Vanessa Potkin at the Innocence Project in New York, and being able to talk one-on-one through these issues really helped me solidify that this is what I wanted to do. And I'm more than happy to always talk to any students if you want to reach out and have specific questions. In terms of what students can do, well, you can apply to do the externship with us. And also if you are already, maxed out or it can't do the externship, we do take, we're willing to consider having someone do something on a volunteer basis with us as well, not for credit. So, happy to talk about those things.
Yeah, someone had popped in a little late and said, how can you get involved? And we do have some externship positions available with the Innocence Project. So please see Professor Megan Bass. And then also to put in, to go back talking about the classes, Professor Cecil Hunt on a very regular basis teaches human rights and mass incarceration. And so that's something that you can definitely look into. And one of the things that we have an ongoing conversation with the Innocence Project is, can we offer a class for law students? They teach courses to undergraduates in Springfield. They've taught classes with law students in Urbana. So that is definitely an ongoing conversation. And then if you're interested in these issues, something I've been involved with for a long time is something called the Truth and Justice Podcast. And that's actually, it's interesting. He takes different cases. It's not a lawyer, it's a former fire chief, but basically crowdsources the investigation. So that's something to check out as well. Lauren, two questions for you more personally that we've gotten. First is, how did you find your way from teaching to criminal defense? And after everything you've seen, do you still have faith in the system? And if so, how?
How could that be possible? So the first one, I was teaching high school, and we had, through the high school, we had set up an arrangement for high school students to observe law professors through a program at the school. It was in the Chicago public school system. And I happened to meet a woman. She's incredible. Her name is Andrea Lyon. Some of you may know that name.
Former dean at Valparaiso Law School,
yes,
actually. Yes.
Yes. And I met her through that program and was invited by her to bring some students to a conference on race and the death penalty. And I saw, that really opened my eyes to a lot of issues in the criminal justice system. And she, at that conference, also had former Governor George Ryan there, and Madison Hobley, who was a man who had been wrongfully convicted and put on death row in Illinois. And I was just like, it just fit with me. It felt like that I was just super passionate, wanted to do that work, wanted to get to know more about that. And that's why I decided then to sort of switch careers and go to law school. And that's why I went to Cardozo to do the Innocence Project there. And that was in 2003 or 4. And then in terms of the system, that's a very difficult question. I feel like I have faith that people's eyes are being opened. I have faith that juries in the future will be more demanding, that people who sit in judgment of people now know and cannot deny that innocent people get convicted, that you have to have high standards to convict someone. There's this quote that keeps coming into my head that's like, the system's not broken. It's doing what it was always designed to do. which is sort of keep oppressed people of color in positions of inferiority and sort of locked up. And the system is continuing to do that, but clearly there's like a reckoning going on. The fact that there is such a movement surrounding wrongful convictions, you know, I think signals that the future is better. And you can't deny that the system gets it wrong. And so the fact that those are undeniable facts at this point, thanks to people like Angel who persevered and were brave to, like, you know, come forward and keep fighting. You know, I do have faith that it will get better, but you know, it's not easy. I mean, you sort of, you know, the amount of paper, the amount of transcripts that we read and see and people writing to us for help, it can get really overwhelming. But you know, what I always think is like, those problems are always going to be there. Like, so if I ignore it, it doesn't mean they go away. And it actually feels very fulfilling to know that I am like one very small part of something that's trying to make the system better. And at least, you know, I've been very lucky to be a part of, you know, over a dozen exonerations. And each of those are people's lives and families and now generations of, you know, changing the future, and people who will go, like Angel, he's the most modest, humble person in the world. He's the most amazing person. I can't even tell you, like, raises rescue dogs, takes in, you know, people who need help, and has truly made the world a better place with his presence. And I always say that with our clients, you know, not only were they imprisoned and denied so much of their lives, but, you know, we have been denied their presence. And to have Angel free and part of our community and our world truly does make it better. So those things, you know, keep me uplifted and keep me going.
Yeah, Lauren, that's an amazing perspective. And just something for me to put in, when I was a young lawyer, I was assigned by my law firm to a death penalty habeas case. And I spent years on this case, and it went on years after I went into academia. And one thing that really that I learned is, let's put resources in at the trial level. Let's get good representation. Our public defender systems are overwhelmed. So when you get to the point in your career that you have the expertise to volunteer, try to get involved at the trial phase. I mean, we would have saved people from being wrongly convicted, but all the time and the money in the system, you know, why the system doesn't recognize that putting it in up front saves so much other resources. So that's a little pitch there. Angel, some questions rolling in for you. And I know we're technically out of time, but I don't know if you have an obligation and need to go, or if you could stay with us a few more minutes. But
I can stay with your case.
Great. One person said, what was the response inside of prison to you professing your innocence? And then how many other people did you meet in prison that you felt were wrongfully convicted?
Oh, wow. Well, everybody in prison is innocent. So nobody's guilty there. When you go into prison, really you don't even talk about it, because you kind of learn that everybody is going to say the same. When you tell them, oh, well, I'm really innocent, they will like, so am I, and everybody here. You don't really know some other prisoners, other people, they are wrongfully convicted into later on. There was the case of one of my roommates. We spent some months in the same cell, and we never really talked about it until one day he got transferred. And next thing I know, he was on the news, 5 o'clock news, that he was being released. And I was, oh wow, well, that was my roommate, that was my cellmate. So there is hope, you know. But you don't really talk too much about it, because in prison you just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Can I share one quick funny story? So
please.
After Angel was exonerated and released, I remember I was like, so Angel, there's all these other people who've had the same experience. They've also been, you know, freed or exonerated because they were innocent, and we're going to have you meet them. And so we like had a bunch, you know, the exoneree and freed people community in Chicago is really dynamic and amazing. And there's a ton of people who get together and support each other when it's not COVID. And so at this time we all got together, and I was like, all right, we get in there, and I'm about to be like, everyone, this is Angel. And I open the door and they're like, Angel, Pee-wee, like, which is his nickname, like they all knew each other. And it continues to astound me. Like, I can't tell you how many clients were the same story what Angel just said, had cellmates who were also innocent or were on the same row. And like, there are so many innocent people in prison. I mean, it's funny, but it's also tragically funny and sad because there are so many people who are innocent in prison.
Yeah. Angel, another person has asked, what motivates you to give back to a society that has taken so much from you?
Well, people like you guys, people that are still trying to fight for others. They are voiceless. They can do much to defend themselves. They went through tragedy in life. In my case, it was wrongfully convicted. In other cases, sickness. There is so many good people in the world. We don't need thousands of good people. We just need probably 10 out of 100, and those will make the difference in the world. There's some days you get frustrated with the system and just want to say enough, I'm done. But there's when you gotta fight harder back and say no. Somebody's probably going through the same thing I went through. Somebody's going through some other things, and just don't think about it. Just get involved and do the best you can. With the Innocence Project, I see a lot of volunteers. A lot of volunteers, they are not attorneys. A lot of volunteers, they are retired. They should be in Hawaii, Florida, enjoying their life, but they decide to stay and fight for others. They're going through some hell in their lives. So whatever it might be, you don't have to be attorney. You can be just the person that bring the mail and drop the mail, and just as long as you stay involved with whatever is positive around you, and then that's what makes a difference. So then we got to work all together to make a difference.
Lauren, do you know the number of people in the U.S. who've been exonerated, and do you have any sense of the number of wrongfully convicted people who are still in prison?
I can't remember the exact numbers I sit here, but counting all exonerations, it's like over 2,500. So, and I want to say it's like 2,700 something. There's another really amazing website that's the National Registry of Exonerations, and it's a group of people through the University of Michigan who keep a registry now of every exoneration, and they've got all the information organized in different ways, and it's really, really interesting. So I would suggest people check that out too. In terms of numbers, you know, I think it's astronomical, and I know some people have tried to estimate, and 4%, 7%. There have been some numbers, based on at least what we know of people who've been exonerated from death row and that sort of thing. I think one sort of nuance of that that's interesting for people to think about too is, people who take guilty pleas or plead to something that they didn't do, that's like, a misdemeanor or, something that will impact them forever. But, maybe something they didn't do, but it may not be that they're in prison for 55 years. So if you take in the, plea issues and that 99% of cases are pleas in this country, then the number really skyrockets and is, I think, just out of control.
Angel, several people are writing and just saying how inspirational you are and thanking you for being here with us tonight. So the final word to you, you've got an audience of law students and law professors. What are some final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Well, thank you guys again for inviting me and to be here today. I just want to say, like I just mentioned, stay involved. It's going to be some time in your life. You're going to go through some bad time, rough time, and don't give up. Never give up. And always, like I have mentioned in other classes, ask for help. Scream. Ask. If you don't ask, nobody can help you. There will be somebody who listens and be willing to help you, whatever you're going through in life. I'm right now probably talking or speaking or listening to the future prosecutors, public defenders, judges, governor, president. You can go as far as you can in your life. It's up to you. And but always do the best you can doesn't matter what you're doing as you are officer, mama home cooking, do the best you can every day. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Angel, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your story. I know that can't be an easy thing to tell over and over again, but we appreciate it. And please know you're having such a positive impact on this world. And Lauren, thank you for being with us. We look forward to developing our relationship with the Innocence Project. And I'll just remind students, you can reach out to Lauren. We've given you the website for the Illinois Innocence Project. Think about that externship with Professor Vest, and hopefully we'll be able to do some great work together in the future.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Everyone, thank you for being here this evening. Have a wonderful evening. And if I don't see you guys before, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Take care.